Now, welcome back. Dr. Ebrahim Harvey says that the success or failure of the Constitution and the state must be determined in relation to the material conditions of people's lives. Now, people do not live on a good or a great Constitution or the right to vote in free and fair democratic elections. Dr. Harvey says that South Africa urgently requires a different set of criteria upon which to determine how meaningful the Constitution is and whether South Africa has the hallmarks of a failed state. And joining us now for a further discussion on these assertions is Dr. Ebrahim Harvey, a political analyst and author. His books include The Great Pretenders, Race and Class Under ANC Rule as well. So, Dr. Harvey, thanks so much for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Yeah, good morning and welcome. Thank you for this invitation, and morning to your viewers. I'm still not fully awake.
It takes some doing, but we can hear you, and I'm sure it will happen in the next few seconds. Dr. Harvey, first and foremost, a lot's been said about the South African Constitution, not only of late. There have been mutterings all along about whether the Constitution is one that represents us as a people, as a nation, in terms of our values, our aspirations, and whether it does actually redress all of the ills of our past, or at least create conditions that would assist that sort of redress. So let's talk about that, and how do we measure the success of a constitution or its value given socioeconomic results of the past 27 years?
Yes, thanks. You see, in the column, I precisely begin in addressing this question of whether we have a failed state or not with the Constitution. Primarily because the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Embodied in the Constitution is what is called a Bill of Rights. Now, that Bill of Rights, aside from the more general democratic freedoms that we enjoy, freedom to vote, assembly, expression, those are democratic. You'll find it in Britain, all around the world. The critical question is the realization and the fulfillment of the Bill of Rights, the provisions, very important. They deal with basic service, etc. The problem is that there is a serious, what I call neoliberal budgetary constraint and limitation in the Constitution. It says very clearly that whatever changes are envisaged or desired, it will depend on the available resources. Now, when you have got a neoliberal budgetary framework and fiscal constraints, and when the emphasis is on reducing deficits and not attending to the basic needs and aspirations and interests of people, it's a foregone conclusion that you will have a serious limitation of resources to address this massive socioeconomic legacy, which the ANC inherited in 1994 from the previous Nationalist Party. So that is the big, and I mean, I did a lot of pieces on this. This is the problem with this thing that we say that the South African Constitution is amongst the most progressive and the best, some people say, in the world. And that's the question. It's false. It's false because, I mean, how long are people voting? From 1994, enjoying many democratic rights like freedom of speech, etc. And what are you having on the other hand? The worst poverty, unemployment, and social inequalities ever. I'm saying to you, ever, even before 1994. And more markedly from 1994 because the ANC was in power. This is what they said. They wanted power to address the needs and interests of people, And so you have this thing that we have purportedly the best constitution in the world, which flies in the face that you have South Africa is the protest capital of the world and the most unequal society in the world. Now you tell me, how do you reconcile the claims of the Constitution being the best and greatest in the world and with those miserable, results, which really, I mean, I said it in my recent book, it smacks of a betrayal. The ANC has betrayed. And even if you go with their racialist mantra of blacks in general and Africans in particular, I said it on radio the other day, it's a lie because the African people, forget about so-called minorities now, even Indians and colors, are worse off than they've ever been today. certainly in post-apartheid South Africa. So how does the ANC answer that thing? When, as I said now, they said their own statements that the Africans in particular would be receiving priority. I mean, just look at what's happening in the townships. Sewage running down the streets, African children dying, falling into pit latrines. Just look at the railways are messed up. You don't have a railway system. I mean, the post office, everything, which is why that column was prompted. I looked at it and said, but what are people saying that we might end up with a failed state when in fact we're living right now, to my mind, where it matters most to people's lives, we're living with a failed state. And remember in that column, I didn't even go into the fact that our railway lines are not operating, that people, the working class in particular, relies on trains. There's no train transport. What has happened, railway lines, infrastructure being pillaged, stolen, etc. It's not in that article. And frankly, after I submitted it, I thought, I should have included that because it's one of the most glaring infrastructural failures over the past few years, amongst many others. So that is why I began to address the serious limitations of the Constitution, not what it promises, but what it fails to deliver because of the inherent neoliberal constraints in the Constitution, which says that they can only basically deliver and make the necessary changes to the extent that the budget and resources will permit.
Dr. Harvey, just to reiterate that point, you say that the Constitution, while it is very good and progressive, has not changed the fact that by far most of the wealth and immense resources of this country are mainly in the hands of the owners of a relatively tiny group of people. Now, how is the Constitution and not the people supposed to change that?
No, in the final analysis, the Constitution was adopted in 1996. And interestingly, our president, former leader of the National Mine Workers, was the prime contributor to the contents of the Constitution. People forget that, he was there, so all the serious limitations it's got the signature of the president on it. The point, however, is that we've got a serious problem in this country with the African so-called majority. I say so-called because, I've penned many pieces. We are all Africans, So to use the apartheid definition of African, the problem is that they return the ANC to office every time there's an election. But as you can see, even they are waking up. You can look at the election results of the 2016 and now 2021 local government elections. The masses who have supported the ANC are beginning to wake up. And it is, you can see it in the results. But that's the problem, And until that changes, but I'll tell you really, look how this new year has begun for the ANC. Just look at how it's begun. Parliament burning, while Cyril is addressing the January 8th statement, the electricity goes out. Even the police said they suspect some foul play. The attacks against the Constitutional Court building. Look at what's happening. And clearly, I don't want to give my own views, but many commentators believe that all those events are, in the final analysis, related to the factionalist war that has broken out in the ANC. And it's highly probable that it is so. But to address your question, it is people. It is people, it is the voters who have to wake up, although there's the big question to be asked. If you vote the ANC out of office, what do you replace it with? That is the very serious problem we sit with. Because if you look at, the only party who talks about more serious social fund transformation is the EFF, And then it has many other problems. If you look at the racialist, mantra of the EFF and the serious problems, in regard to the national question in this country, that is the problem. So even if the ANC is voted out of office, which I strongly suspect really is going to happen in 2024, read my lips, I really believe everything the ANC is on such a serious downward trajectory at the moment, and things seem to be worsening by the day. And this is a critical year because the elections for a new president is being held in December. You know, I really think that the ANC stands a very good chance of losing the election in 2024.
Dr. Harvey, you do suggest, though, a different set of criteria that is needed to determine how meaningful the Constitution actually is. Let's speak to that. What are those criteria?
But that's exactly what I was saying. I was saying that, you know, it's very clear, the column, that people do not live by the fact that they've got a vote, etc. They need food, water, electricity, jobs, etc. And that is, you see, it's what's called substantive democracy, as against the other things you call formal democracy. All these many democratic rights, formal democratic rights you have. The substantive democracy, which we have failed to realize, is when the wishes and aspirations and needs of ordinary people are adequately met. And you just need to walk around the townships. Let's not forget about colored Indian, we just talk African townships to make the point. It is in the worst state ever, right now, under ANC rule. And you know, while they complain about lack of resources, they took care of themselves. I know these people personally. Go and look where they live. Go and look where the ANC elite, economic and political, live. It is shocking. The chasmic gulf between the ANC leadership and its followers and members is incredible. It's incredible, and it has grown worse all the time. And on the other hand, you've seen how the ANC so-called cadres have pillaged, stolen public funds, and there you can see the Cyril Ramaphosa, the president, recently indicating that, in fact, the ANC has also used public funds, you know, which is unlawful and unconstitutional. We have to see what's going to come out of that. But when I speak about a different set of criteria, I'm talking about adequately what has happened to the Freedom Charter, what has happened to the RDP, what has happened to the progressive provisions in the Constitution. Take the land question. They had from 1996. They didn't need that amendment. It's a lie. The scholars have spoken to it. They did nothing with the fact that the Constitution, Section 25, allowed the state to make significant advances to address the land question. Nothing was done until the EFF and Malema in 2016 raised it sharply in Parliament. And to try and steal the thunder of the EFF, suddenly Cyril and the ANC leadership says, no, we need to amend this Section 25. It did not need any amendments whatsoever. So that's what I meant when we need a different set of criteria, you know, by which we measure the effect and impact of the Constitution.
And just finally, Dr. Harvey, what about the citizenry? Because the citizens have agency. You know, we talk about how one can argue that the Constitution and its tenets are only as good as how far it can be upheld and applied. That being said, though, why have South African citizens then abdicated responsibility for upholding in their own way and holding accountable leaders so that their rights can be upheld and met? Because one can argue that whatever is happening now is happening with the tacit approval of the electorate of South Africa, of the broader citizenry of this country. So why are South Africans not using their agency by and large?
Because they've been suckers for punishment. But it depends, you know, all these questions are determined by the level of political quality of consciousness, understanding of what's happened. And you know the history of what's happened in this country with African people in particular, bound to education, so many things, you know, and the serious limitations of the educational system post-1994. And it's there really, as that's precisely why I said it's up to the electorate, it's the voters who have to wake up to what's been happening. And they have been waking up very healthily and significantly, and you see it in the 2021 and 16 local government elections. But you have to ask a broader question. They're part of the citizenship of the citizenry of this country. What about civil society? And this is the unfortunate thing. Civil society, let me tell you, You can go and look at the situation from the 1990s. The ANC played a big part in the disempowering continuously and the offenses against civil society. I could write a book about it. The ANC played the biggest part in the disempowerment of civil society. You know what a powerful civil society we had, and you've seen the best of it in the 1980s. Look what happened when the ANC took office. They consciously, I believed, weakened civil society so that it can play less, if not any, watchdog role over them in power.
Dr. Harvey, of course, much more to talk about, but we have to leave it there for this morning. But thanks so much for your time. Author of The Great Pretenders, Race and Class Under ANC Rule, Dr. Ebrahim Harvey there. And he argues that South Africa urgently requires a different set of criteria to determine how meaningful our constitution actually is and whether South Africa has the hallmarks of a failed state. Dr. Harvey believes, well, if you look around at the material conditions under which most South Africans live, it seems that we have reached that point.